The sky over Earth darkened with the approach of something massive far beyond the scale of any threat humanity had ever faced. A fleet of alien ships, the size of mountains, hovered over cities across the globe. They appeared without warning, and without a single word of communication, just a cold, ominous presence. The people below watched in disbelief as the strange vessels cast shadows that stretched for miles. Panic spread like wildfire from the streets of New York to the jungles of Brazil. Humanity had no answers, only questions. How could they have known what was coming? How could they fight what was so clearly superior? Governments scrambled to act in a disjointed frenzy. No one had seen anything like it before. Alien ships hovering with advanced technology, so far beyond anything humans had created. Their designs were sleek, almost organic, with iridescent surfaces that shimmered and pulsed with an unsettling energy. The very air seemed to hum with the weight of their presence. Every weapon Earth possessed was fired at once, from missile silos to orbital laser arrays. Every single shot was aimed directly at the alien vessels, but to the horror of humanity, none of it had any effect. Not a single missile made a dent, not a single laser left a mark. The ships remained unharmed, their shields like invisible walls preventing any harm from reaching them. As the hours passed, the world's leaders watched helplessly, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The idea of being defenseless against such an advanced force was too much to grasp. The people on the streets began to panic even more. They ran for cover, they begged for answers, but all they received were false promises from governments that had no answers of their own. In response, the alien ships released smaller craft like drones that descended on the planet with pinpoint accuracy, targeting military bases, power plants, and communication hubs with ruthless efficiency. Entire cities fell into darkness as their infrastructure was destroyed. The aliens did not speak, nor did they show any sign of emotion. They simply acted with methodical precision. Their invasion wasn't a rush to conquer, it was a cold and calculated operation. Humanity was being neutralized with every passing minute. The military commanders of the world sat together in secret locations, their minds racing, trying to find a solution, trying to formulate a plan. But their efforts were futile. None of their weapons were effective against the alien technology. All their strategies seemed useless against such an overwhelming force. One of the generals leaned back in his chair, staring at a screen filled with reports of destruction. His fingers drummed anxiously on the table. "We need something more, something they can't see coming," he muttered to himself. The room grew silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Everyone knew what he meant, but no one had a clue how it could be done. In the face of such overwhelming power, there had to be a way to fight back, to show these aliens that Earth wasn't going to give up that easily. But the question remained, how could humanity hope to stand up against the seemingly unstoppable force that was now in orbit above them? And as they prepared to make their next move, the world watched helplessly as the first wave of ground invasions began. The alien ships descended lower into the atmosphere, their forces spread out in perfect formation, as if they had done it 1,000 times before, while the rest of Earth waited with bated breath, unsure of what would happen next. As alien forces spread across the globe, humanity watched in terror. But within the shadows of Earth's fallen cities, a different kind of movement was underway, not of panic, but of action. A secret meeting was being held beneath the surface of the Earth, in a facility once thought to be a relic from another age. It was here, where the last hope of mankind rested. A team of military leaders, scientists, and engineers gathered together in a room filled with old blueprints and makeshift equipment. Far from the prying eyes of the invaders, they were here to plan, not just to survive, but to fight back. The leader of the group, General Lucas, sat at the head of the table, his face grim, his mind working through every possible strategy. The aliens were too powerful, their technology too advanced. But there was one thing they hadn't considered, one thing that no one had even suspected until now. Deep beneath the Earth's surface lay a power so ancient and mysterious that it could shift the balance of the war. But it was risky, and they didn't know if they could harness it in time. A young scientist, Evelyn Harrow, spoke up, her voice shaking with both excitement and fear. "I've been studying an energy source from a deep mining operation we did years ago in Antarctica. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's unstable, but it could work if we can manage to stabilize it." She paused, her eyes wide with the weight of her own words. It could be the key to stopping them. but we have to move fast." Lucas nodded slowly, his mind racing. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice sharp. Dargahero hesitated. "The energy is volatile. It could tear the planet apart if mishandled, but in the right hands it could disable the alien ships. In a matter of minutes we could turn the tide of the war in one strike." She leaned forward. "The problem is we don't have much time. If we don't act soon, the aliens will have complete control of Earth, and we'll be too far gone to recover." The room fell into silence as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. They all knew what was at stake: their families, their homes, their future. They also knew that if they failed, the planet would fall without a fight. General Lucas took a deep breath and made the call: "Prepare the operation. We don't have a choice. We move out in 24 hours." The team scrambled into action. Engineers began constructing a device to safely channel and stabilize the energy. Scientists worked around the clock to refine the calculations, and military units were readied for the impossible task of infiltrating the alien forces that now controlled Earth's major cities. The clock was ticking, and with every second the alien presence grew stronger. The question wasn't whether they could succeed, it was whether they could even get close enough to deliver the strike. As the hours passed, a new wave of fear began to creep across Earth. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their home, taking back their planet from an enemy that thought it could just take it without a second thought. In a war room filled with maps and holographic projections, General Lucas gathered his team one last time. "We have one shot at this. If we fail, it's over. But if we succeed, we change everything." His voice was steady, but inside he was gripped with uncertainty. This mission was humanity's last hope, and no one could afford to let it slip away now. The alien forces had established a vice-like grip over Earth, their fleets patrolling every continent. Cities once brimming with life were now silent husks, their ruins filled with the echoes of the destruction they'd wrought. Humanity's last bastions of defense were slipping away, but there was still a flicker of hope within the underground facility where the world's most brilliant minds worked tirelessly. The plan was set in motion, but there was no certainty in their actions, only a shared belief that they had no other choice. Every minute counted, and as General Lucas oversaw the final preparations, there was an unsettling realization that they were about to do something beyond anything humanity had ever attempted before. They would not just fight. They would strike where the aliens least expected, using their own technology against them. As the team worked, Evelyn Harrow continued to refine the unstable energy source, her hands trembling from exhaustion, but her determination unwavering. She was fully aware of the risks. A single mistake could trigger an explosion capable of leveling entire cities, but this energy was their only hope. It had the power to disrupt the alien technology, to make their ships and drones useless in a split second, and with that, they could turn the tide of the war. In the war room, Lucas stared at the holographic map of the alien invasion. The alien fleet had moved into Earth's lower orbit, encircling major cities and blocking any attempt to escape or communicate. Their forces were spread across every major continent, and their soldiers, strange, armored creatures that moved like shadows, had already begun to occupy human strongholds. It seemed hopeless, yet Lucas knew that even in the darkest moments, humans had a tendency to surprise. "We need to hit them hard and fast," Lucas said, his voice steady but resolute. "Once we deploy this energy, there won't be a second chance. Every soldier will need to be in place before we launch." The room nodded in agreement, but the atmosphere was tense. Nobody had any real confidence that the plan would work. Their best efforts so far had been futile, and the alien superiority was undeniable. Yet, something in the air had shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was defiance. Humanity wasn't going to bow to these invaders, not without a fight. The team had developed a series of covert operations to infiltrate the alien-controlled cities. Specialized strike teams, equipped with advanced human-made stealth technology, would take control of vital alien command centers and plant devices that would activate the energy source. Once activated, the energy pulse would radiate outward, interfering with the alien ships and causing a chain reaction that would bring their technology to a halt. The risks were enormous. Getting close to the alien strongholds without being detected would require the highest level of precision, but the military had no choice but to press on. If they could reach their targets and trigger the pulse, the aliens' technological advantage would crumble. The first wave of human resistance was ready. Special forces, hidden in the shadow of fallen cities, moved under the cover of night, carefully planning their every step. They knew that they were humanity's last hope. Failure meant certain extinction, but if they succeeded, they would show the invaders that Earth wasn't just a fragile, helpless planet. It was a world that would fight to the very end. As the strike teams set off toward their targets, General Lucas and Darhero stood together in the facility's command center, watching the feeds and holding their breath. The moment of truth had arrived, and humanity's future hung in the balance. Each second that passed felt heavier than the last, but they couldn't turn back now. The first moves had been made, and there was no going back. All that was left was hope, and a weapon they weren't entirely sure would work. "Just keep them safe," Lucas whispered under his breath, hoping against hope that the impossible could be achieved. The night was thick with tension as the first wave of human resistance moved through the war-torn streets of the alien-controlled cities. The strike teams, equipped with cutting-edge stealth tech, slipped past the alien patrols unnoticed, shadows in the dark. Every movement was calculated, every step taken with precision. There was no room for error. Failure meant annihilation, not just for them, but for everyone. The world, it seemed, was holding its breath. General Lucas watched the live feeds on the monitors in the underground facility, his eyes scanning every detail, his mind sharp and alert. The strike teams were making progress, reaching their targets without detection, but the more time passed, the heavier the silence became. The aliens were methodical in their operations, their soldiers relentless in their pursuit of total domination. What seemed like the faintest glimmer of hope now hung by the thinnest thread. "Just a little further," Lucas muttered, barely audible over the sound of his breath. In the facility, Darhero stood beside him, her fingers hovering over a console as she monitored the stabilization of the energy pulse. The device was now primed, the volatile energy source crackling with potential. She had never felt more alive, or more terrified. The calculations had all been made, the risk assessed. But as the moment drew closer, the weight of their mission settled deeper into her bones. It was a risk, and no one knew if the energy would work as intended, or if it would tear apart everything they had left. "Target acquired," came the whisper over the comms, followed by a series of quick reports. Strike Team Alpha had reached its destination, an alien command center on the outskirts of what had once been New York City. The alien forces, seemingly unaware of the imminent danger, had kept their focus on the larger cities, but now the humans were striking where they thought least to be attacked. It was a game of deception, and for the first time, the humans were beginning to play it well. The strike teams deployed the devices swiftly, planting them in key locations within the alien command center. The countdown had begun. The devices were set to trigger the pulse once the energy source was activated. A single signal would send the shockwave rippling across the alien fleet, disabling their technology and crippling their control over the forces on the ground. The humans had always been underestimated, their resourcefulness taken for granted. But now, the tide was beginning to turn. Just as the final team completed their mission and began their retreat, a sharp, chilling sound broke the silence. The aliens were beginning to react. It was a low hum at first, then it grew louder as alien drones, once silent and dormant, powered up. The sky over New York lit up with blinding energy as alien ships shifted their focus. Their sensors had picked up the pulse. It wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was a full-on counterstrike. "What the hell is happening?" Darhero shouted, her voice filled with panic as the screens in front of her flickered. "The energy. They've detected the pulse." General Lucas slammed his fist onto the table. "No, we can't stop now. It has to work. They don't know what we've done yet." But even as he spoke, The enemy forces began their retaliatory push, sending waves of drones to intercept the strike teams. The first ripple of the pulse surged out, but the aliens' quick reaction blocked it, only partially. It had an effect. The alien command center's communications were disrupted. For a moment, they lost contact with their forces. The pulse had worked, but not as fully as expected. Is it enough? Deverharo's voice was barely a whisper. We won't know until they make their move. Lucas replied. The air was thick with uncertainty. Hold your breath. The war's just begun. The pulse had made an impact, but now the aliens knew something had changed. They weren't just facing an invasion of the weak. They were facing an enemy that wouldn't back down. With the first ripple of humanity's counterattack, the alien fleet seemed uncertain. But it was only a matter of time before they adapted, and when they did, they would return with a vengeance. The humans had taken the first step, but the fight was far from over. The pulse had struck, but it wasn't enough. The alien fleet's systems had faltered, but not for long. They had adapted quickly, and now their drones swarmed like angry hornets, chasing down the strike teams that had planted the devices in the alien command centers. In the shadows of what was left of New York, the humans fought to remain one step ahead, their only advantage now the element of surprise and their knowledge of the terrain. General Lucas stood rigid, his eyes locked onto the screens as the battle unfolded. Strike teams had been scattered, and many were retreating under heavy alien fire. The pulse had caused a disruption, but it hadn't been enough to cripple the alien forces completely. Yet, Lucas could see something in their movements. Their precision was faltering. It wasn't the perfect, synchronized assault they'd begun with. Something had shifted. A crack had appeared in the facade. He wasn't about to let it slip away. We need to push them harder, he muttered, his voice like steel. We can't let them recover. Dr. Harrow, who had been monitoring the energy readings, turned to him with an urgent expression. General, the energy source is stable, but its full potential hasn't been realized yet. If we can unleash another surge, this time at a higher frequency, we could break their command systems completely. It could disable their fleet for good. But can you guarantee it won't blow up in our faces? Lucas asked, his gaze narrowing. The risks were escalating by the minute, but there was no turning back now. I can't, she said, the weight of her words heavier than any weapon they had. But I know it's our best shot. Lucas didn't hesitate. Then we move forward. We're not stopping until it's done. In the streets, the remnants of humanity's strike teams regrouped, their numbers thinned by the alien counterattack. But they were determined. They knew now that they had something the aliens couldn't account for, their resolve. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans were relentless. They had been pushed to the edge. But that was when they were at their best. The alien drones came in waves, their glowing eyes like 1,000 judgmental gazes piercing the night. Yet the humans adapted, using their knowledge of the city's ruins to evade and outsmart the invaders. They had one mission now. Reach the control station where Darharrow's energy source was stored and unleash the full power of the pulse. One team, led by Captain Rain, darted through alleyways and abandoned skyscrapers, their breath heavy but their focus unshaken. They'd lost comrades along the way, but they wouldn't stop until they saw this through. Almost there, Rain said through gritted teeth, signaling her team to move faster. Meanwhile, in the underground facility, Dr. Harrow adjusted the frequency settings on her console. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on her chest. Her fingers moved quickly, locking in the new parameters. It was now or never. General, the pulse is ready. We're at full capacity, Darharrow reported, her voice tight. Do it, Lucas commanded. As the command was issued, the energy source flickered to life once more, its unstable core sending waves of crackling energy into the control system. The pulse began to expand outward, its frequency tuned to a new level of intensity. The alien drones that had been advancing toward the human team suddenly staggered, their systems glitching, then shutting down altogether. The alien ships in orbit flickered as their shields flickered and then vanished. The disruption was massive, far beyond what anyone had anticipated. But it wasn't over. As the pulse surged, the aliens' retaliatory strike began. They knew their technology had been compromised, and they weren't about to let Earth get the upper hand. Alien ships powered up, unleashing their devastating energy weapons at the facility where the pulse had been triggered. "We've got incoming," Captain Rain shouted into her comms, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to finish this now." Inside the control room, Darhero's fingers flew over the console, her heart pounding. If they could keep the pulse active for just a few more moments, they would win. The alien fleet was reeling, but they still had their weapons, their deadly power, and their hunger for vengeance. The final stage was here, and humanity was at the edge of its last chance. As the pulse continued to expand, humanity held its breath. The alien forces were faltering, but would it be enough to break them? The next few moments would determine the fate of Earth forever. The pulse continued to reverberate through the alien fleet, each wave further disorienting their systems. For a brief moment, the battle seemed to hang in the balance, suspended between chaos and clarity. The once steady alien drones froze in midair, their glowing eyes flickering like dying stars. Their once imposing ships now seemed sluggish, their movements erratic as they tried to re-establish control. But even as the pulse crippled their technology, the aliens weren't about to surrender without a fight. Inside the underground facility, General Lucas' jaw tightened as he watched the screens. "They're not down yet," he muttered. "They're adapting." Again. Darhero, sweat dripping down her face, was glued to the console, watching the pulse spread across the globe. "We've hit them hard, General," she said, voice strained but resolute. "Their systems are collapsing, but they're trying to reroute power from their backup systems. They'll regain control if we don't keep this sustained." "Then we push harder," Lucas said. "If we give them an inch, they'll take a mile. We need to ensure this pulse goes global, across every continent, every ship, every drone." Darhero hesitated. "I can amplify the signal, but the energy source is unstable. It could cause a chain reaction that would destroy everything we've worked for, including us." Lucas' gaze was unwavering. "We don't have time for hesitation. You make it work. We need to finish this." Outside, the strike teams, battered and bloodied, had finally reached the heart of the alien stronghold. Captain Rain's team was at the front line, facing waves of alien soldiers pouring out from the broken remnants of their command center. They fought with a ferocity born from desperation, their weapons cutting through the alien ranks. But it wasn't enough. The alien forces were regrouping, and soon they would be in full control again. "Stay on them. Stay sharp." Rain barked as her team pressed forward. Their weapons fired with a rhythm of defiance, cutting through the night as alien bodies hit the ground. But they couldn't hold off the tide forever. Their mission was clear. Reach the central hub, the place where Darhero's pulse could be amplified and stabilized. The planet's fate rested in their hands. Meanwhile, in the control room, Darhero was working frantically. She knew they were running out of time. She adjusted the frequency, dialed up the intensity, and launched the final command. A low hum reverberated throughout the facility as the pulse expanded, cascading outward, reaching the alien ships in orbit, penetrating their shields, and sending waves of disruption through their internal systems. One by one, the alien drones dropped from the sky, their once precise movements now completely erratic. But just as the tide seemed to turn in humanity's favor, the worst possible thing happened. A secondary, hidden fleet of alien ships emerged from the planet's dark side, ships that had remained undetected until now. They were larger, more heavily armed, and designed specifically to counteract the pulse. The alien forces had prepared for this. They had anticipated the worst. General Lucas cursed under his breath as he saw the new ships appear on the monitors. "We've only got minutes," he said, his tone grim. "Those ships are their last line of defense. If we don't take them out now, we'll be fighting until the end of time." "We don't have minutes," Darhero shot back. "We have seconds. I can't hold this pulse much longer." Outside, Captain Rain's team pushed through the final stretch, reaching the central hub. Their mission had always seemed impossible, and now it felt even more so. The alien reinforcements had arrived, and every moment spent fighting felt like a weight that was pulling them all toward the abyss. They had made it this far, but now they had to make it count. Inside the facility, Darhero pressed the final button, releasing the full force of the pulse across every corner of the globe. For a moment, everything went silent. No explosions, no gunfire, just the deep, humming energy that filled the air. Then, all at once, the alien fleet began to crumble. The pulse had reached its target. The energy rippled outward, hitting the alien ships and their defense mechanisms with the force of 1,000 storms. Alien ships began to plummet from the sky, their systems completely overloaded. But it wasn't enough to wipe them out completely. Not yet. The true test would come in the next few minutes. Would the pulse reach their final defenses in time, or had humanity just played its last card? On the ground, the strike teams continued to fight. The aliens were faltering, but they were not yet finished. Every step was a gamble, every moment a race against an inevitable storm. Humanity had dealt the first blow, but the final battle was still ahead. And as the last alien forces regrouped, they realized one undeniable truth. Earth was not finished yet. The ground trembled as the alien ships began to fall, crashing into the ruins of once thriving cities. A brilliant storm of energy erupted in the sky as the pulse continued to expand, sending shockwaves that rattled buildings and shattered what remained of the alien stronghold. It was a victory, but the battle was far from over. The pulse had disrupted the alien fleet's ability to communicate, and their ships were spiraling out of control, but still, they fought with ferocity. Their last wave of reinforcements was pushing harder than ever before, determined to crush humanity's hope with sheer force. On the front lines, Captain Rain's team moved quickly through the remnants of the alien compound, their boots heavy with the weight of their mission. The central hub was just ahead. Darhero's pulse needed to be fully stabilized, or the surge of energy would collapse into chaos, taking everything down with it. There was no time to waste. They could hear the alien forces closing in, their weapons charging for the final push. "Keep moving. We can't let them regroup," Rain shouted, her voice unwavering despite the chaos unfolding around them. The team pushed forward, their rifles cutting through the last pockets of resistance. Their bodies were exhausted, their faces smeared with dirt and blood, but their resolve was unwavering. The planet, their families, their future, everything rested on their ability to finish what they had started. Inside the underground facility, the pulse continued to ripple outward, surging through the alien systems with a relentless force. Darhero's hands trembled as she monitored the fluctuations in the energy readings. Each second that passed felt like a countdown to an unknown disaster. The pulse was destabilizing faster than she had anticipated. There was a chance, just a slim chance, that if they didn't recalibrate the energy, everything they had fought for would be lost. "They're almost there," Darhero whispered to herself, fingers flying over the control panel. She adjusted the parameters again, trying to lock the energy in place. Her mind raced through calculations, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a gamble, one that could either save them all or tear the world apart. Outside, the last of the alien forces pushed forward with a final desperate charge. Their large armored soldiers began to flood the central hub, each one a deadly weapon in its own right. The humans, battered and broken, stood their ground. It was now or never. The team fought tooth and nail as alien soldiers rushed them, their claws and weapons clashing with the humans' advanced tech. Rain ducked behind a pile of debris, narrowly avoiding a blast from an alien's pulse gun. "We've got to hold them off," she growled, signaling to her team. "Darhero, you need to buy us time." "I'm doing what I can," came the shaky reply over the comms. "Just keep them away for a little longer. The pulse is almost stable, but I can't guarantee it'll hold under pressure." The minutes ticked by in a blur of gunfire, alien growls, and the whir of advanced technology. It felt like the world was crumbling around them, but the humans' resolve only grew stronger. With each alien soldier they took down, a flicker of hope ignited in their hearts. They weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. "Rain, we're almost there." Darhero's voice crackled over the comms. "Just hold them off for 5 more minutes. I can lock the energy down, and it'll be over." The captain nodded as if she could see Darhero in front of her, even through the haze of smoke and chaos. She glanced back at her team, their faces determined, their hands steady as they fought with everything they had left. "Hold the line," she yelled. "Just 5 more minutes." The alien forces, relentless and enraged, charged one final time. But with each push, the humans held their ground. For every alien soldier that fell, another took its place. But the resistance only grew fiercer. They had come so far, and they weren't about to let it slip through their fingers now. The fate of the world had already been decided in their hearts. Victory or death. They would fight until the very end. As the seconds dragged on, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for that final moment when everything would either collapse or change forever. The pulse was almost stable. The alien forces were faltering. And humanity was ready to finish what they had started. The final minutes of the battle stretched on like an eternity, every moment a test of endurance, resolve, and sheer willpower. The humans had fought through the darkest hours of the night, their spirits battered but unbroken. The alien forces, however, were relentless, driven by an almost animalistic need to destroy. But something had changed. The pulse, a creation born from human ingenuity, was doing its job. It had disrupted their technology, cracked their defenses, and forced them to adapt in ways they hadn't anticipated. And with every passing second, it was pushing them closer to victory. Inside the underground facility, Dr. Harrow's hands hovered over the console, her breath shallow as she worked to stabilize the energy pulse. The hum of power filled the room, rising in intensity. Sweat trickled down her face, but she didn't dare stop. Every adjustment she made brought them one step closer. The pulse was now flowing with purpose, moving outward, spreading through the alien fleet, through their weapons, their ships, their very biology. It was unraveling them. This was it, the final gambit. "Just a little longer," Darhero whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Hold them off for just a little longer." Outside, Captain Rain's team fought with everything they had. The alien forces were desperate now, throwing everything they could at the humans. But the strike teams had been through hell and back, and they knew something the aliens didn't. They were stronger together. Their weapons clattered, and the distant sound of explosions filled the air. But each human soldier moved with a quiet sense of purpose. Their mission was clear. They had come too far to fail. Rain crouched behind a chunk of debris, reloading her weapon. She barely had time to breathe before the next wave of alien soldiers was upon her. But this time, they didn't seem as coordinated. Their movements were clumsy, their attacks wild. The pulse was already starting to tear at their systems, unraveling their control. The alien soldiers were becoming more erratic, more disoriented. This was the moment they had been waiting for. "Almost there, Rain." Darhero's voice crackled over the comms. "Get ready. The pulse is locking in." Rain's heart raced, but her expression was steady. "Understood," she replied. "We'll hold the line. Do what you have to do." A flash of light lit up the sky as the pulse reached its apex. A final surge of energy swept across the battlefield. The air seemed to crackle with the sheer power of it. And then, like a dam breaking, it happened. The alien ships in orbit shook violently as their systems collapsed. Drones fell from the sky like broken toys, and alien warriors staggered, their bodies jerking as their neural systems fried. The humans could see it now. Victory was within their grasp. The alien forces, once so mighty and imposing, were disintegrating. The pulse had worked. They were no longer the unstoppable invaders that had first landed on Earth. They were the prey now. But even as the tide turned, Rain knew the battle wasn't over. There were still pockets of resistance, still alien forces regrouping and trying to fight back. And the humans would not stop until every last invader was defeated. "Push forward," Rain yelled, leading her team into the heart of the collapsing alien base. They pushed through the wreckage, cutting down the last of the alien soldiers who had somehow managed to survive the pulse. But their fight was weakening. Each wave of resistance was slower, less coordinated. The aliens were on their last legs, unable to mount a full counterattack. In the control room, Dire Harrow's hands slammed the final command. "It's done," she breathed. The pulse had fully stabilized, and now it was pulsing in sync with Earth's energy grid, its power radiating outwards, rendering the alien fleet helpless. The alien ships were falling from the sky, spiraling out of control as their engines powered down. The remaining soldiers, confused and broken, were easy prey for the strike teams. It was over. The invaders had been beaten. General Lucas stood, his gaze fixed on the now vacant battlefield. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "They're gone. Earth's free." Rain's voice came over the comms. "General, it's over. The alien forces are done." And for the first time in years, there was silence. The kind of silence that only came after the storm had passed. Earth had been scared, its cities in ruins, but humanity had fought back. They had stood their ground against an overwhelming force and emerged victorious. The war was over. Earth had won. And as the last alien ship fell to Earth's surface, a new era began for humanity, one built on defiance, unity, and the unbreakable spirit of those who refused to surrender.